Awesome. We're live on YouTube. So let me just go ahead and post this to the Facebook page. All right. Awesome. All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Welcome to our Happily Ever After Romance Writing Workshop with Amy Spalding. Before we begin, I would just like to say some thank yous. I would like to thank the other members of the Visiting Writers Committee, Professor Supercar and Dr. Ogden. I would also like to thank Dean Thongtaraj and the English Division staff for their support. We would like to give a special thank you to the Pasadena Festival of Women Authors for whose generous grant is paying for this event today. So we really want to thank them. And so what we're going to do is Amy's going to do a little workshop on writing romance. Then we're going to have we should have enough time for some Q&A at the end. So if you would like to ask her a question when it's time, you can either post it in the chat, or if you're watching on Facebook, you can post it on Facebook. And I think even on YouTube. So we kind of got like 3 things going on here. Oh, and I'll send you the link to the YouTube, Professor Supercar. And then we'll begin. So Amy Spalding is the author of several novels, including the best-selling We Used to Be Friends and The Summer of Jordi Perez and the Best Burger in Los Angeles. She has a BA in Advertising and Marketing Communication from Webster University and an MA in Media Studies from the New School. Amy studied long-form improv at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater, and she is here with us today. So take it away, Amy.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you everyone for coming today. I love talking about writing romance. I love talking to students. So just really excited to do this on a Tuesday and on Valentine's Day. Fantastic. So I have a workshop I've done a few times all about writing romance novels. And it's sort of like maybe not the parts you expect. This is very structure based. This is very sort of like what each part of the story accomplishes. Which I like this because even if you're not a writer of romance, if maybe you're just a reader of them or just someone who likes seeing how stories fit together, I'm hoping this will be, useful, interesting, etc. But of course, I'm hoping you're all going to go write a happily ever after this. Make me very excited. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started with that. I would ask if you'll definitely have questions. I shouldn't say you'll definitely. It's possible you have questions within it. If it's okay with you, please put them in the chat. If you have questions for later, that probably makes sense. But I will say, if I'm talking and you're like, I just don't understand what's happening, hopefully one of your professors will alert me and say, hey, you're talking nonsense. Someone needs you to make sense of something. So feel free to say, please clarify something. Because I've done this for beginners. I've done this for people who are huge romance fans. I've done this for people who already write romance and just need some tips. So it's sort of like a thing that functions in the middle for beginners and experts. But if you need some clarifying, I would love to stop and clarify. So let's go. Here we are.
Yes, yes. And I was just asked that you raise your virtual hand if that's the case, so that we can see you and then call on you. Or unless you put it in the chat, obviously. Okay, go ahead.
I'm also trying to hide everything so I can see my screen, but that's why you'll have to audibly interrupt me, Akila.
Got it.
All right. This is called From Meet Cute to Happily Ever After. This is sort of a shortened version of the one I do in a bigger workshop, but this is going to hit all the biggest points. So let's get into it. This is me when I had professional hair and makeup. I have written rom-coms. I have also coached and edited on a freelance basis for others. And one thing I really noticed was that I was giving really similar notes to beginning romance writers, but also experienced romance writers on their earliest drafts. I thought, hey, maybe let's write this stuff down. And so other people who are just getting started or in the middle, that these notes can be useful for them too, because it felt like so many things were universal and sort of like the same little pitfalls were happening, the same challenges. And so I thought there's got to be a way to reach a bunch of writers and give you these tools so that maybe you can have stronger beginnings. Here is me. I'm Amy Spalding. My pronouns are she, her, hers. As you just heard, those are some of the names of my most recent books. I will say that my new book, which is my first book for adults for her consideration, which is a romance, it is out a week from today. So that's what I'm excited about at this very moment. All right, let's talk about rom-coms and romances. So I think they're magic. And that whole reason is that the happy ending is guaranteed by the genre. If you're picking up a romance or watching a rom-com, etc., you know that the book is making a promise with you. No matter what happens within the pages, no matter like, are people going to cry? Are people going to fight? You know that the happily ever after, which we call an HEA, it's going to be there. I, the author, I'm going to deliver that to you. You, the reader, are going to get it from me. So you can cringe that people are making bad choices. Misunderstandings are happening that make people cry, maybe even make you, the reader, cry. But like deep down, you know it's going to be fine. These love interests are going to find their way back to one another. That means if you are the writer, you have to become a magician, because you have to make it seem like all those things are happening, even though technically you know everything's going to be okay. It takes a lot of work to get all those emotions heightened, make everyone get a little nervous despite the safety of the ending. And the thing is, romance novels have been dismissed since, you know, the dawn of time, because women write them typically. It's a genre that people think about as silly and escapist. When a romance is good, it's so good and it goes down light and easy, but it's hard to pull off, like a magic trick. It takes skill. So let's make magic, or just learn about what the magic is. So there are a lot of structure guides to write romance. I think if you're really interested in this, I definitely recommend Gwen Hayes' Romancing the Beat, but it breaks it down into like 9,000 steps. 9,000 is too many for me. It stresses me out. There's a screenwriting guide by Billy Murnick called Writing the Romantic Comedy. I think the way he breaks things down is great. I also love Save the Cat. Save the Cat writes a novel. I think if you're interested in writing, you should read a lot of structure guides and then sort of decide what works best for you. That's what I did. And I kind of came up with a mashup of all these things that work for me, but like it's taking kind of what I thought was the best from each and also simplifying it, because again, 9,000 beats are too many. We talk about story beats. These are just a part of the story where something has to happen kind of at a certain time to give it that structure that has the payoff. So let's get into what that looks like for romances. Sorry, the little, you know, like in the controls for Zoom, they end up like going over the parts of the screen I need to see, so I have to like move them out of the way. So if I seem like I'm being weird, that's literally all that's happening. I could also just be being weird. All right. So I'm going to write all the steps of the romance novel. However, we're going to get into each of these on their own page. So if you're like frantically scribbling down right now, you're going to have so much time with each of these. Unless you're just a frantic scribbler, go for it. So first there's the setup. And again, we're also going to talk about what each of these is, what pitfall, like each of these gets their own slide. So don't worry if you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Then we get the meet cute, but no, it won't work, but ... It will work and ... It was all building to this. Or was it? Dark Night of the Soul, learning and growing, big gesture, and the epilogue. So here's the thing, writing a book, I'm not going to lie, it's hard. No one doesn't think it is. Writing a romance novel is so much fun. And yet when I look at the screen, when I look at like how many pages I have to write when I get started, it's so overwhelming. I'm like, how will I ever do it? But when I think about I just have to write 10 things, that's so much easier for me. So if you're someone who's interested in doing this, but you're a little overwhelmed, or you think like, how will I ever write all those words? You can probably write 10 things today. So, and I'll explain what I mean by that, of course, when we get into it. So what I love about the structure is it really boils things down and it makes it so accessible. And I think if you have a little, like a germ of an idea for a romance, this I hope will help get you going and make you believe you can do it. If you're someone who just loves reading romance, watching rom-coms, I also just hope this will be interesting to see, like, how do the writers do it? How do they make you believe and fall for the characters along with the characters falling for each other? So these are the 10 things we're going to learn today. But before we get into it, I talk a lot about pitfalls. I want to talk about why I use that term. I think mistake sounds judgy and rude. And the types of things I flag as pitfalls are not necessarily mistakes. In fact, for every item I tell you to avoid doing, if you read a lot of romance or just a lot of books in general, you're probably going to think of an author who successfully pulled it off in their story. So when I talk about pitfalls, i.e. a hole your manuscript might fall into and never crawl its way out of, often this stuff makes it harder and it can introduce issues unintentionally. So then you're like writing from down in a hole. I would like to save you extra work and energy, especially if you're a new writer, especially if this is your first manuscript or an early one. As you're writing or revising, you'll have more background info from me showing you now. So you can hopefully make some choices more thoughtfully and hopefully save yourself plenty of time and effort. And then if you're still like, I want to do it like this, go for it. You understand why it can make it harder and you can prevent that. I really believe in writing advice that makes you feel empowered and excited. I do not believe in any advice that says every writer has to do it exactly this way. Don't believe any of that. Every writer does it their own way. I just think there's things that we often do that make our lives worse, and let's make it better and easier. Writing is hard enough. All right, let's talk about the setup. Setup introduces you to the love interest and the world they live in. This is their before. So even if your book is only from one point of view, this might set up one character only, and that's okay. If your book is from 2 points of view, this probably takes a little longer and you're going to meet both characters. So let's talk about common pitfalls when writing the setup. Also, if you can't tell, the way I have the color bar at the top, you see the little heart, that's on the setup. It's that tiny blue spot at the beginning. These kind of are a vague approximation of the percentage of the book that beat should take up. So as you can see, the setup is real fast. That's just the opening. A lot of other stuff will take more time. All right, pitfalls. So we need to show where and what this character's now is. If we're not defining where we start, how do we know that where we're going matters? I think it's really important in romances. We'll get a little right after we do the whole every beat. I'll talk about this, but characters need to make journeys. They need to learn and grow, as you saw from one of the beats. And so we need to see where they're starting out. This is kind of the before. And if we don't get that idea, like, why do we care that when they fall in love, everything gets better if we can't tell that it wasn't great before? What is the main character's goals? Even if there's someone who's like, I don't even have goals. Okay, great. I know a lot about a person by them saying they have no goals. But like, so much is needed to power a book. We have like at least 80,000 words in front of us. So 70,000. But let's be real. It's probably 80 at least. Setting up goals does not just help with romance. It can help you with a B plot, other relationships like friendships and family, characterization. Again, who is this person? We're going to spend a lot of time with them and more. This is often, excuse me, the false theme stated moment, which is a thing I've made up myself. But this is when a character might say something like, I'll never be the type to fall in love, or like, ugh, I hate disorganized, free-spirited, lives without a planner types. Disgusting. Obviously, if you set that in motion, we know what you're doing, right? Like if a character says that, they're obviously going to fall for a disorganized, free-spirited, lives without a planner type. This is the part where you get to kind of have fun. Like you get to take your type A character who's like, oh, work is too busy. I will never have a romance, and like tear apart their life to give them some fun. So this is where you get to like set up your character for what they think they know and what they think they want to like, maybe they're going to land somewhere else. All right, next up is the meet cute, but no, this is normally referred to people as just the meet cute. But we'll get into why I think I add the but now. This is when your love interests are thrown together for the first time within these pages. It's the reader's first chance to see these two people together. Make this specific. Like, okay, if I just went to pick up this coffee. I just held up my coffee, even though I'm just on a share screen and you can't see me, but I'm holding up my coffee. I just went to pick it up. When I went to pick it up, what if I saw a hot person? That'd be nice. But I live in Los Angeles. I see hot people at Starbucks all the time. So like, why is this a bigger moment than just that? Like, what is the conversation these two people had? What, yeah, in real life, you might just be like, wow, I saw a really hot person. I would like to talk to them. But this is a book. You need more story than that. And like the characters don't know the future, right? So like, what about this moment sticks with one or both of them that like, this is a meaningful moment? Like most of us meet new people every single day. So why does this stand out? What makes it different? And by the way, they don't have to like each other. They don't have to hit it off. There has to be some reason that this is memorable. And like, what else can this advance in the book? So you have a B plot to worry about. You have inner journeys, more on that later, to attend to. So like, what can get accomplished with this? I give the example of like, maybe they meet like I just talked about meeting in a coffee shop. Okay, great. Maybe one of them is on their way to a job interview and they're stressed out and frantic. They're carrying like resume, something. So maybe they spill stuff, it gets panicky, but like you're also showing that they're on their way something. They're panicky, they're klutzy, they're awkward, all these things. So like just by having them meet, you're also getting some other characterization and plot things built. All right, the next, okay, the reason I say but no is in like real life, let's say you meet a cute person at a place you like and they're great and you hit it off and you have a wonderful moment together and then it's just good. That is a perfect thing to happen, especially on Valentine's Day. But this is a book. It's got to be more complicated than that. So that's why I add the but no to remind you, it can't just work completely in the moment. Like something is going to like go askew or not be perfect because otherwise this is not a full novel. This is a little pamphlet about nice people meeting. Which brings us to, it won't work, but. So yeah, in real life, if two cuties meet and are meant to be together, maybe they'll start dating, they fall in love, they like all the same things, it's great, they end up happily ever after. A book needs more conflict than that. So be sure to justify this even when the characters are wrong. Like if your characters, maybe they're friends already, maybe they're coworkers, and they're like, well, it might be weird to date. Well, like nothing in their life would actually turn weird. Like readers will not understand why they're not just dating. So like show us. Maybe that they're just friends and people around them are always saying things like, God, it's so good you guys don't date, you don't fit together. Or maybe like they've never thought of each other that way and it's very, they have like a different vibe than that. There's nothing, you can justify anything, but we need to see the character work. We need to see that like the reader believes it as much as the characters do. Or I'll give an example. Sometimes a character might say it'd be too weird if we dated. You know as the reader that they're wrong, but let us see why they think they're right. Don't make this too contentious or hard to see past. Like, if you're like, well, I can't date you because you killed my brother. Yeah, you probably can't. Don't get together with that person. We still want to root for that's a dramatic example, but like still, like I think some of the like enemies to lovers books are tricky because you have to make them hate each other enough to power the beginning and then not have it be too bad. So you want them to get together at the end. This is a delicate balance. You know, characters don't have to have the same reasoning or they don't have to have complementary, like opposite reasoning, but there should be some balance of reticence from both of them. Like, even if there are moments where one's pursuing the other and then maybe the other one's pursuing them, the whole manuscript shouldn't be one-sided. Like, let's see them both struggle. It's like fun to see two people fight against for love and then like for love. But you don't just like want the whole book of one person chasing the other. That just feels kind of like stalking. All right, next up. This is where it kind of starts to get more fun. If you like to write the like swoony parts, it will work. But so like no matter how dead set these two people are and not getting together, there's always the shift in thinking. This story beat is the true start of the shift. So here's some common pitfalls. The characters cannot just change their thinking because we're at this point in the book. Like they don't know they're in a book. So like if the reader's like, so they didn't like each other, but now they do and they think it's fine. Like you haven't built to it naturally. And so you're not going to have that magic. We have to like feel it come from within. Like small moments can do a lot of heavy lifting. You don't have to like do some big thing. Like, wow, no, I like him. It's like maybe someone just does a tiny thoughtful thing or you see someone in a different light because you hear like, oh, you find out they volunteer with like dying dogs. I would swoon and cry. So like, it's a weird thing where I think sometimes like writers really want to show like a big gesture, like a big gift, this bold move. That stuff's exciting, but like, you know, one love, like an example is like maybe a character knows that the other one like loves some dessert from a restaurant that's like 20 minutes away. Maybe they're by it and they stop by and get it for them. Oh my God, that would bring me to my knees. So like, again, it doesn't have to be like jewelry or like a big date out. It could be just like seeing that someone sees you can be very moving. So remember to make it specific to the characters. It doesn't have to be big. And don't forget to let us in on character emotions. A change of heart doesn't feel like anything if we don't know what's in that heart to begin with and we don't know where it's going. Most common note I tend to give on manuscripts is, but how does this make her feel? So like, and it doesn't have to be the character literally saying, I feel this, but like, you know, let us see the like physical gestures she's making because she feels flustered, or, you know, let us see how her heart rate is picking up because, you know, she's around this person. All right, it was all building to this. This is halfway through the story. This is a big move forward in intimacy. In like adult romance novels, this tends to be where the first sex scene happens. Doesn't always. This could be a kiss, especially if we're talking YA novels or younger. But also just be a big moment of honesty. Like, what is intimacy for these two characters? So, like the last story beat, do not let this happen just because you're at halfway through the book. Like, if you have not gotten these characters to this, like, you haven't done the work, go back and figure it out. They can't just like start kissing and having sex because we're halfway through the story. It has to make sense to the reader, and you're writing romance, not erotica. Like, this has to be for reasons beyond like thirst and attraction. So obviously, don't worry, you can have this too. If you do include sex or something physical, like what is the intimacy gained? Like emotional intimacy. It's really easy to focus on like the pleasure and mechanics. Like I feel like if you read romance, we've all read those books where it's like he touched her there, and then she put her hand on his ex, and he put his hand on her, and I'm like, this feels like Twister or something. It doesn't even. It's like what, like what is changing emotionally for the two of them to like have this act together, to be like so vulnerable together, or like not vulnerable, like what is it for these two people specifically? If it's only about sex, like how's the story being moved forward? You'll notice I say so many things about being specific, and it's because all of this work is character work. It's not just about the story. In romance, the characters are so vital. If you write closed door sex, that is in a book where it's sort of like, and then we kissed, and it's like dot dot dot, you know, and then the next morning. So that's fine. Lots of romances written that way. Lots of readers like that. So you still have to do the work of like letting some intimacy be gained there, even if we don't see it happen, and the characters to be responding to that the next day. We need to know that they have taken the step forward in intimacy. So we're moving the story forward no matter what we saw on the page. So if it happened, it has to matter no matter if we saw it or not. Or was it? So in a great relationship, this is not going to happen. You have sex, it's great. Now you're happier. Everything's going swell. But this is a book. Things are not perfect. Are there problems afoot? This is really not a beat where there's a lot of problems yet. But you know how at the beginning it was sort of like they can't be automatically together because there's some issues? Maybe these issues start feeling valid again. Maybe if this is a type A person who is like slowly like learning to put their phone down and like live in the moment. Maybe it's just when they start maybe picking up their phone again. Maybe they're like Slack is chiming at like bad times and they're actually looking at it instead of like into the eyes of their beloved. So like not giant fights yet, just, you know, the polish is starting to fade. This is my favorite note for all writing, but I choose to give it here. It's create, don't invent. And that is because I have seen this moment get wild. So all of a sudden one of the characters is like, I'm jealous you work with men. You must love them all. It's like, what? Or like brand new complications unrelated to the plot we've seen so far. Like, oh, my job is going to send me away from you and you don't even care. It's like, we've never mentioned this. Just characters behaving in odd ways. Y'all have done so much work if you've written to this point so far. You know these characters so well. What are the things that actually cause friction between the two of them? That's what we want to see. We do not want to see brand new stuff. If you want to do a big, bold thing like, oh my gosh, his job is going to ship him away, oh, great. That's a great thing to add to that type A person who seems to care too much about work. That is not a thing to add to someone where work or their relationship to it has not been a problem so far. So like, a lot of people want to jump ahead because this beat, again, is still really nice. It's full of swoons. Maybe there's still sex, other physical acts, sweetness, fun, more intimacy gained. So like, this is not where things like go off the rail. This is where just things start to like, not be awesome a little bit here and there. It's like when you have that little voice in the back of your head of like, oh, you said a weird thing. Should I worry about that? That's this beat. It's easy to write the big, terrible, bad version of what's ahead, but we're not there yet. This is like building. This is like a simmering time. But give the characters time to be happy too. Like we want to see them together. Let the doubt build. Also, sometimes people just neglect this. They go kind of from it being happy to like the big misunderstanding and then badness. Like you want to, again, simmer. We're going not all the way up to boil immediately. Or you do, but you have to simmer in between, right? Like the little bubbles have to start. This is like a middle sort of building beat. Like you're still driving towards something. And this is the one pushing you there, but it's a little bit of the last one and it's a little toward the next one. All right, Dark Night of the Soul, my favorite beat name because it's so dramatic. The temporary breakup. It's the lowest point in the book emotionally. It's terrible. You might cry when you write it. Don't make it too bad. We want these guys back together. If you make it like horrible, like we're not going to root for them. So like we want to root for their reunion. Again, find that fine line. Bad enough that we believe it. Not too minor though. It could be cleared up with like one brief and simple conversation. We've all read those books, right? Or like Yeah, you saw me with my ex. I'm going to be the best man in her wedding. Okay. If that's all that happens, that's not enough. It's hard to root for the reunion if the breakup feels silly. It has to feel really right and final in the moment. Like, don't inject any hope yet. Right now, your characters have no hope. They're like, it's over. This is not the dim evening of the soul. It's a dark night of the soul. This should be internal, not external. By that, I mean, back to my create own event, this is not because someone got offered a job out of state. This is because someone cannot commit. This is because someone cannot prioritize. This is because misunderstandings happen, big misunderstandings. This is because the problems they worried they had at the beginning are manifesting. So that's what we're doing. We're not saying like other people don't believe in us. Well, who cares about other people? It's about the two of you. All right, learning and growing. This is always sounds like the least sexy beat. But let me tell you, people who get more competent and can take care of themselves better and learn to love themselves, sexy as hell. So this is like figuratively speaking the morning after, like the shock of the loss, but also the sun rising. So like, do not neglect that. We're not ready for the happy ending yet. We got to get there. We got to earn it before we're close. Don't worry. So this is where you're earning the happy ending. So let them earn it. You don't want to make this lopsided. Everyone needs to learn and grow. A good romance is not about a perfect person and a screw up. You want two people growing. That's very romantic. And don't make this all about the relationship. So if you did all the great and hard work at the beginning, your characters have more to fix right now than the romantic relationship. And that's where this starts to happen. Let's go back to the example I made up, the type A person. So like if they're a type A person who's neglecting everything but their job, like they're neglecting their friends too, right? Probably neglecting their hobbies. Do they even have hobbies? They might be neglecting their family relationship. So like maybe we see them get better at all this stuff here too. This is like the part, if you guys watch Queer Eye, it's like the part where Karamo is like, let's go to a park, talk about your inability to open up, but also you have to balance on a bench. And you're like, what? But anyway, like what, or who is Karamo in this situation for your characters? What is the bench? Like, you know, sometimes you can give a character like a really obvious, like, you know, if they're bad at like being vulnerable and showing emotion, like, are they going to go like, again, help an injured dog? Maybe. Very sweet. What is the right thing for that person? I think for the type A character, it's showing them be able to put work down and do something not for profit. What is that for them? So you want to show that their life is improving. You want to show that it's something to do with a romantic relationship, but it's also that they want to make themselves better overall. All right, big gesture. This is it. If you watch romantic comedies, this is the part you're living for, right? Running in the rain, shouting, follow that cab, and speeding to the airport. Big speech, the heart-stopping kiss. Very beginning of the happily ever after. So even if one or both a love interest gets help from a friend, like the big gesture must be driven by at least one of them. This is not like two people being shoved together. Like they're the main characters. Give them agency. They have to go after what they want, who they want, and make amends for the mistakes they made. Don't be generic. I love that I say that just after I shouted, running in the rain, follow that cab. It's like you, the writer and the readers know these two people so well now. So like, don't give like a happy ending, give their happy ending. What is it for these two specific people? What do they need to overcome to get here? What is their very best way to kind of start that happily ever after? Building and falling. Sometimes people write this and then they're like, and then some other nice stuff happens. And then some other nice stuff happens. And then and I'm like, what is happening? You're at the end of the story. Just end it. It's very tempting to want to live in the fun part, but like it deflates the big stuff. You lose your structural arc. So like build, and then you're out. And then epilogue. If you're writing adult romance, this exists. In YA romance, it rarely does. And the last moment, this is the last moment with your love interest when they're truly living their happily ever after. Common pitfall is not writing this at all. It's not legally required, but I think readers like a chance to see these characters happy in the future to know it lasts. Again, making this generic. It doesn't have to be a proposal. It doesn't have to be their wedding. I like seeing characters happy in all kinds of situations. What is these two people's happy ending? This does also not have to be all about their romance or relationship. Like the story should have given us so much in these two people's lives. So like to only live it to their love story leaves out so much opportunity to show their better lives now. That's the end. That's the last beat. We are see 10 things and you've written a romance. The reason I say it's that easy, which I know it's not, but if I just said, okay, like, are you kind of thinking of writing a romance and I said, like, who are these two people? You probably have an idea. How do they meet? You probably have an idea. What keeps them from being together? You probably have an idea. What keeps bringing them back together, though? Again, you probably know. And now you're like halfway into the beats of one already. So you can see when you boil it down this simply, it's not nearly as overwhelming. Ideas give to ideas. And that's why I like doing it this way. I like showing people it's super possible to write these stories. Finally, my little last step before we do some Q&A, talk about more, I like to talk about the journeys. So romances are not just about falling in love. My favorite romances are about so many things: career, family, friendship, adulthood, new beginnings, reinvention. Also, romances are about falling in love. Falling in love is about so many things too, though. It's communication, laughter, intimacy, trust, maturity. Ultimately, I believe romances are about self-actualization, which again, I know does not sound sexy, but I also think people who've like had their therapy and gotten their shit together is very sexy. Readers are not just there for two people falling for one another. They're reading to see two people become better. So these are the three journeys that I think are at the heart of every romance. And if you do these and get those beats in, your book is like at least going to make a lot of sense, if not be great. So that is what I promise you. Journey one is the journey of love. This is the love story, the big plot, the heart of the book. Those are the 10 things we just went over. You got this already if we're this far. The next journey is love interest number one's journey. This person is going from flawed to more self-evolved. This person learned and grew. Great. And then journey three, spoiler alert, you probably know already, it's love interest number two's journey. This flawed in a different way person also learned and grew. That's it. I bring this up though, because I read a lot of manuscripts where one person is a screw up and the other person is great. And by the end, the screw up person is less of a screw up and the great person is exactly the same. It's like, sure, I guess that happens sometimes, but I think in general, like most of us are screw up somehow and great somehow, and we're all doing our best. And a good story is going to let both of those people sort of learn from each other, learn from the other people in their life, and, get a little better together. That is the end of my very simple lecture on how to write your own romance novel, which is 10 steps and 3 journeys. So I should call it that. That sounds great. So now I'm going to take some Q&A, discuss whatever else, and I'll show my face again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. That was great. That was really great. So if anyone has a question, again, you can type it into the chat. If you're watching on the Facebook or the YouTube, you can type your questions there. If no one has a question immediately, I can get us started with one, and then you can kind of think of some other questions.
Why don't you get us started with one?
I think I'll get us started with one. So I think one of the things you talked about the pitfalls, common pitfalls. You talked about how it took you some time to figure out like all of these things. So can you talk a little bit about your romance writing journey and like how has it changed the way you used to write a book versus the way you write a book now? Maybe what romance was in the beginning, but now how you do romance?
Yeah. So I started writing books many years ago. I was like trying to write books as a kid and then getting more and more serious about it as I got older. And I definitely was like, I'm going to write serious literature. It's going to be about the war or like a famine or, whatever. I don't care. I shouldn't say I don't care about wars or famine. I do. But like, that's not what I'm reading. That's not the media I'm seeking out. So it took me kind of a while to realize I just like want to write about like people and have it not be like serious literature. I like fun things. I like where people fall in love. I like witty banter. I like books that are funny. So it took me sort of a while to figure that out. And the awesome thing is that it felt like the more I did that, the more people liked my writing. So it was almost like, oh, this is what you want out of me. So when I first started thinking about writing romance, I was very like, I want to be different. It's going to be like an anti-rom-com and no one ends up happy together. And I was like, what are you doing? Nobody reads those books because I want people to not end up happy together. I feel like I have a lot of like 90s, like I'm still like a snarly 90s teen where I'm like, no one's happy and everything's sarcastic. It's like, no, that's not, what are you doing? You're writing romance. Things can be happy. So I sort of had to come around to like accepting that like, I can just like write and sunny things. I can like things that have like, just because a romance has a happy ending does not mean it has to feel like expected or like unsurprising. You can still have a lot of fun within sort of the rules of the genre. So that was just sort of my journey to get there. And I also was never much of an outliner. I was never someone who was like, let's look at how a story functions. I was like, oh, just write things, they'll be good. And then I would have to edit a ton and rewrite a ton and like make a lot of like changes. And when I started really honing in on sort of like the beats of a rom-com, it was really because I read that Billy Murnick guide to screenwriting, which I think helped me more than a lot of novel things, because even a book that's a romance feels so like cinematic, I think, in how it's structured. And that helped me so much. And it really forced me to like make decisions and figure out like how the first thing has to build to the second to the third. And like all these steps really matter. And like how like story drives story drives story. And the more you come up with, the more like you get to use. And so now when I sit down to write, I have like those beats of the Billy Murnick one or mine. And I just like fill it like just a thing of like these two people, here's who these people are. Here's how they meet. Here's why I don't think they can be together. Here's why I think they can't. Like, I just get that all down. And then I break that into chapters and then I write each chapter. So I have become like an outlining fiend. I also, when I decided I was serious about writing adult romance, because I think the structure and tropes are even sort of more, I would say strict, but romance readers expect certain things. You don't want to let them down. I spent like 6 months just reading a ton of romances and being like, what are they like? What happens in these? And so like I wanted to learn how they function before I just like dove in.
Awesome, thank you. Steve has a question, how a romance subplot fits into an action novel. So are you asking how would you write a romance subplot in an action novel, Steve? Yes, okay. Do you have any experience with that, Amy, that you could share with us?
Well, I definitely have written books where the romance is the B plot, it's not the A plot. And I think it's really about like, if you decide that's your B plot, you still kind of want to attend to a lot of those things. Like you still want to have two people who are maybe like, they're a little flawed, they're getting better together, they're going to have some complications. And I think when it's the B plot of an action, probably those complications are going to come from whatever that plot is. Like, are they trying to like do a heist? Are they trying to like save a weird thing from a museum? So the great thing is that you get to like use that stuff as complications for your characters. And then kind of the thing they're building together is not just the love story, but whatever the answer to the sort of like the finale of the action story is. So that can be super fun, I think.
Okay, thank you. Jake would like to know, is there a certain location you like to write in or a place that helps your brain the most when you're writing?
I used to really love to write in coffee shops and like pubs and like outside of the home places. And then lockdown happened in 2020. And I had to get really not precious about it and just like write wherever I could, because I was stuck in my home all the time and it was lonely and sad. So the good thing about that is it did teach me that like I don't have to like go to Starbucks every time I want to get work done. I can just, sit at my desk at home. I did like set up a better desk situation, a better work from home situation. Now I have like, I'm not in it now. I'm in my day job office, which is a little more gray cubicle situation, as you can tell. But like at home, I have like a cute area. I have my candles going. I have my cats jumping around. So it's like, at least it's cozy.
Awesome. Did anyone else have a question? I have some more. Okay.
Oh, I know you do.
Oh, you know I do. Yes. All right. So,
I have a question.
Oh, yes, Marilee, please.
So what will you recommend for those who wants to write poetry, but with romance, to do in beginning and ending, but in a short?
I mean, I think it's really about thinking about like the story you're wanting to tell through it, like what parts of the romance you're wanting to capture. Is it about like capturing the emotions of romance within the words? Is it about thinking of like what story you're telling of, again, of like, is it about this person comes into your life and like more things seem possible? Is it about someone, the complications? When I think about poetry, I really think about like, I feel like I'm so dumb when I talk about poetry, but I really think about emotions. I think about like the beauty of language that can convey some like really big topics. And so I would think about all those themes that you find in romance and how you would then sort of like bring those themes to whatever your poetry is.
Okay,
But
thank you so
read
much.
I read some like romance novels written in verse that are beautiful too, that are like telling a more active story. And those, I think, again, I think poetry can be such a good way to tell a love story.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's sometimes we see novels in verse, and so that's a way of using short form poetry, but over and over to write a longer story. And then of course we have epic poems and short, like poetry is so versatile. You can really do almost anything with it. Yeah. So do you ever use real people in your stories as characters?
Not
Or
really.
people you know,
I
I
mean,
guess. Sorry.
what
People you know.
people I know. I mean, for the most part, not really. Everyone is very like fictional for me, but of course, like you're all like you can't help but like you're always pulling from your own life because that is the only life you know, and you're always pulling from, you know, a conversation may remind you of like a conversation you had with someone or like something you thought about once. So it's that weird thing of like no, but also aren't we always pulling from real life somehow? But I will say in my first rom-com that I wrote, now it feels like a million years ago, kissing Ted Callahan, there's like a friend character named Reed who's like sort of a disaster about girls, and it was like based on my friend Todd, who is a disaster about women as an adult. And I got all these notes that were like, this character is too weird, he is not believable, you have to make him more realistic. And I was like, these are all things this man does. So like sometimes you can think like, oh, I can base it on a real character, and it's like, no, it's even harder because if your friends are weird, so sometimes it's easier than not.
Yeah, truth is strange. I know. Yeah, truth is stranger than fiction. Okay.
He had like a chart when he was in high school of like every girl in his class and his percentage of like possibility that he thought he had with her. Like, it's real weird about girls. I had to steal some of that stuff.
Okay, so I guess another, so you talked about, using an outline, you talked about, you mentioned several times, drafting. So how many drafts does it usually take you to produce a finished romance novel
It's really
or
hard
novel in general?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to say because I sort of like, I will like outline and then I will sit down and start writing. And then I will usually like kind of like futz with that draft a bit of like making sure like each sentence is really beautiful and like I'm really happy and the jokes are sharp. And then like it'll hit a point where I just like keep writing. And then I'm like not allowing myself to, at a certain point, I don't allow myself to go back a lot and reread because it's sort of like, that way lies madness, because there's always something you could improve or like a sentence to make better. And the main thing that's the most important early on is just getting the words on the page. So I have a pretty strict rule for myself that once I'm really like going, after the first chapter or two are written, it's like, don't look back, just keep writing. And then I'll take like days here and there to like reread what I've written and like do a little work. And then sometimes if I realize it's not really like, oh, I think it's not really going right, I'll like dive back into my outline. I might revise that. That may make some changes for the draft, but it may just make changes upcoming. I might change a few things. So it's like, is that a new draft? It's hard to say. So I usually do a few versions of that. Now that I outline so heavily, I do less big revisions of the actual manuscript. I do a lot of revisions of the outline. It saves me a lot of time. And then at that point, I usually like give it one full sweep to make sure like, does it make sense? Did I like, I don't know, just you'll find weird mistakes you made or just like stuff you thought you included that you forgot, just for consistency. And I'll like send that to my editor and then I'll wait for her notes and then I'll do like a big edit based on those notes. And then I will there usually be like one more round of revisions where it's like copy edits, things like that. But, that draft of mine that may technically kind of be the first draft, it's also sort of like the 10th draft. So it's hard for me to say. It's such an ongoing, I think some people like cleanly do like a save as and start a new one. And I'm just sort of like, I don't know, does chapter 1 work? And I go and mess with it, but like I didn't mess with much else. It doesn't feel like a new draft to me.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Crya would like to know, which work of yours are you most proud of?
I do feel like that's always just like whatever I finished most recently. I'm really excited about for her consideration because it's my first book for adults and it's about to come out. So I'm really happy. I have a new young adult novel coming out in April called No Boy Summer. I'm very proud of that because I sort of wrote it during a really stressed out time. It was like still lockdown and I had a really tight deadline. And I kind of felt like I was just like spinning my wheels. And then when I worked on it later and reread it, I was actually really proud of it. It's a story about sisters, and then the romance is sort of like the B plot. But it was And it was like a weird experience writing it where I just felt like I had to get a lot of effort and I wasn't getting enjoyment out of it. And then it still turned out great. And I was like, oh, it turns out like maybe I'm a real writer. Maybe I know what I'm doing. So
Okay. Well, speaking of being hold on. World building. Okay. So let's talk about world building. I think this is world building. I think this is important because people think often that when you're writing realistic fiction, you're not doing world building.
yes.
But the opposite is true. So can you talk a little bit about how you do world building in your novels?
Yeah, that's so true. People think of world building as being like, I'm writing in the Star Wars universe, so I have to like do all this stuff with Star Wars things. I should have had something I had more prepared to talk about in my head. Star Wars things. There's Ewoks, there's Porgs, there's Oscar Isaac, and he looks amazing. So that's what I know about Star Wars. However, people think, oh, you're just writing in your real world. You don't have to do that. You still do. Think about the town you live in. Like, what's specific about it? Like, do people walk? Do people take cars everywhere? Like, are people rich? Are people poor? Is it a combination? Is it a diverse neighborhood? Is it, close to a city? Is it a city? Is it like way out in the middle of nowhere? Like, how do people talk about the area they live in? That stuff we will not know unless you tell us, even if you're in a real place. And like, all my books are set in Los Angeles, but they're set in different parts of Los Angeles. And my characters are all different too. And so like how they see the area they live in can be very different. So it's important to get all that stuff down. It's important to describe what they see. It's important, I have characters who don't drive. And so like they have to walk to get everywhere. Their view of LA is very different than my characters who have a car and can get around, or my characters who live out in the suburbs and it's like a much longer haul, and how they think of their neighbors, how they think of like their richer friends, etc. So like it's very much, it still is important to do all that work, even if you're using a real background. So, which is kind of annoying. You think you can skip out of it if you just set it where you live.
Yeah, so I wanted to go back to, because you were saying, oh, I guess I am a real writer. I am a writer. And so one of the questions one of the student had is like, when did you first begin to identify as a writer?
I mean, in some ways, I've always identified as a writer. Like it's like I was someone who, like, as a little kid, was like, it was like I like stories. Who writes the stories? People. They get paid for it. Great. That's what I'm going to do when I grow up. It was that simple. It's also not that simple because that is not just a job they give out, and you cannot just get a lot of money from it immediately, or maybe ever. Who could say? So part of me is like, I've always thought of myself as a writer, but there's part of me that like did not feel like it until I had a book published, and there's a part of me that still doesn't, because I'm like, well, I'm just doing this thing. There's people who are fancier than me and win awards and do other things. So like, I don't know. It's like a constant. It's a weird identity thing. I don't understand.
Okay, I think that's fair. Okay. Okay, so some people may find that writing every day can be a daunting task. So your creative energy may run low. So what are some techniques that you use to make sure you have a sufficient supply of creative energy?
Oh, that is so hard and so real. And I think for most of us, probably most people in this class, definitely for me, I have another job that is not writing, where I'm sitting right now. And it's just really hard. Sometimes it just strains you. Sometimes it takes up so much of your mental energy that you have nothing left. And that is just a thing that's real and that you have to contend with. And so the first thing I like to tell people is that, like, do not beat yourself up if you can't write every day. That is super normal. I often do not write every day, especially when I'm first drafting, because it takes so much like fresh creative inspiration. Like, I just don't always have it. So if you're not, that's totally okay. Many books have been written without people writing every day. If you're like, no, I'm still struggling, I'm never going to get this done, I just think finding ways to disconnect from other people's stories so that there's room for your own is really important. I was struggling to get stuff written, and I realized I was listening to like podcasts in the car every single day on the way to and from work. And then I was like, during my lunch break, I was like reading other people's books, and it was like, well, when was my brain supposed to start like thinking about anything else? I had like no time where I wasn't filling it with some other media. So I like, made some playlist of songs that sort of like put me in like a good creative mood, or just stuff I like to listen to. And, try to maybe like, if I'm really struggling to write, don't always like read the most exciting things that make you just feel intimidated in your lunch break. And I found just giving myself like a little extra time every day without other people's stories in my head, the podcasting helped more than anything. Because I feel like a lot of times driving or like commuting. It's a great time to just sort of like, like you're not staring at a screen. You have time to like think of your own ideas. And I was just like jamming it full of other people's thoughts. So like taking those out, giving myself a breather, that helps so much. And I think getting away from screens whenever you can, like take a walk, like go hang out with friends and like not get out your, like just do something where you're not like inundated. Even go see a movie, because at least it forces you to like focus on like one story at a time and not just like a barrage of information.
Okay, awesome. So another question that we have is, well, let's say first, how do you define writer's block, and then how do you get over it?
I used to be really snarky about this and be like, well, at my day job, I don't get media planning block. I just have to keep working. So writing, you should just keep working. And it's like, no, it's totally different. Sometimes it's really hard. I think there's so many reasons you could get it. We just talked about feeling like your creative well is drained. And I think sometimes that's it. And you just need to like refill it somehow, or, take the noise out. Sometimes I think it's because you have a problem in your story and you don't know what it is yet. And so you're sort of like floundering. And then sometimes I think it's just like really easy to get out of the habit of writing. And like y'all, not doing anything is so much easier than doing something. So I think sometimes it's just really about, and I think that's my snarky answer does come from that. It's like, sometimes you just have to do it. And sometimes it's not going to feel fun. It's not going to feel like, I think it's so easy to think of like the ideal of a writer where you just have these like beautiful daydreams and then you like sit down and you like write them and it comes out great. And you're just like the magic of storytelling. Like I said, writing No Boy Summer felt kind of terrible every single day. And then it turned into a book I'm super proud of. So like, I think sometimes it's also getting over the idea that it's always going to be like fun or feel good. Sometimes it's just like, no, it's going to feel like shit, but you're going to get through it and you're going to write something amazing.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's do a little crafty thing and then we'll go back. Well, yeah, let's do that. And then we'll go back to something a little bit more serious. So how do you decide on your character names?
I would love to say I feel like writers are like, well, if you look at the meaning of these names, you can see how it's symbolic. I'm like, I don't know. I just sort of like toss things around in my head and then eventually one feels okay.
Oh, okay. I'm fine with that.
I mean, I hope so. That's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, well, because the student specifically was like, they have a hard time coming up with names, maybe because they are drawing from the well of names of people they already know or something else.
That part is hard because like if you know people, you're like, well, I can't use that. That's just going to make me. I will say I like to go to if you go to like baby name websites, that's fun. I go to the Social Security. This is the most like boring tip, but I promise it works great. I go to the if you type in Social Security baby names, you can it brings up this website and you can type in a year and it shows like the most popular names of people born in that year. And so I'll be like, oh, my character's like 30. What was 30 years ago? So first you have to do math. I'm sorry. And then you like type in that year and like you can pick like the top 500 names of like all genders from that year. And then you can just like scroll through and be like, oh, Rebecca, that's her name. And like, great, it's Rebecca now. But it does like make you think, oh, thank you for linking to that. That is I use that so much.
And we have a mutual friend, Jasmine,
Mm-hmm.
Hillary, and I remember when she was doing one book and she looked at the roster of basketball player names because she was the college basketball players, because she was like, she needed a college person's name. And she was like, what would be a good name for a college student? And she looked at the basketball roster and was like, oh yeah, that'll work. So,
I also feel like if you're drawn to a name, like don't overthink it, just use it.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get back into the dark night of the soul here.
Yes.
So I have a question about rejection.
Oh.
We talked a lot about writing. And so so what went through your head when you got rejected by publishers? What was that like? What made you decide to keep writing? And like how did you use the anger to fuel you? Like give us the skinny.
Yeah. I had a lot of rejections from publishers at the beginning of my career. Like I signed with an agent and I was like, wow, that was pretty easy. I bet I'm going to get a book deal any minute. And that is not what happened. It took like years from then. Got a lot of rejections. Lots of them were really nice, but they were still like rejections. And honestly, it was just really hard. I cried a lot. I felt like garbage. It is so hard to not take it as like a assessment of yourself, even though like, rationally it's not. but like, it just feels like, oh, this thing I poured my heart and soul into is like, nobody likes it. No one thinks it can make money. So great. It just feels rotten. And I will say that for me, I allowed myself sort of the freedom to think about quitting. I tried to like take some time off, and ultimately I just wanted to keep writing. I was always drawn back to it. I always had a story I wanted to tell. I always wanted to finish something. And so I just kind of kept going. And then I think luckily, once I had some books published, when I faced rejection again, while it sucked, I had more confidence because basically I had 4 books come out, and then I wrote a 5th book, Summer of Jordi Perez and the Best Burger in Los Angeles. And my publisher was like, no, I will never publish this book. I would publish something else from you, but never this book. I don't like this book. It's not relatable. It feels weak. And send us something else, but never this book again. And I was like, wow. It was, I will say too, like my first book about a queer person, my first book about a fat person. And it felt, I'm just gonna say it didn't feel good. And it felt a little maybe pointed. And I thought, like, I think she's wrong. I think this book is really valuable. And I think this is just like a skinny straight woman who doesn't understand the story I'm trying to tell. And so we kept trying other publishers. I ended up going with a really small publisher. They're the only ones who were interested in. I barely got any upfront money for it, but I really believed in it. I really believed there was like a market for this book, and I believed it mattered. And like, it ended up at that point being my most successful book to come. Like I'd never had a book as successful as that and made more money than all the other ones, maybe even all of them combined. And it made me like, it proved to me that like, I know what I'm doing. And sometimes rejections are super not about you. They're about the limitations of, the person reading it. And, I think that the pettiness in me was really validated. And now I get to be like, maybe you're just wrong. Maybe this book's going to outsell your expectations, because it happened for me once. So yeah.
Yeah, I love Summer of Jordi Perez, as you know. So
Well, thank you.
I think it's great with her fruity shorts and her, and also, I love burgers. So that was
the most research I've ever had to do on a book, and it was great. Just eating burgers.
Yeah, that would be a really hard challenge for me, I would have to say. No, if
Yeah,
I
I
had to eat a
really had
burger
to
a
step
week,
up to that.
yeah, if I had to eat a burger a week, I think I might make it. Okay, we are winding down. So I just want to give a last call if there are any other questions that students would like to ask. Have a few minutes left. Just want to see. If not, let's talk about what you're currently watching.
Ooh, I've been watching this cult documentary on Hulu called Stolen Youth, about this weird cult happening at Sarah Lawrence College. It made me feel like I have a lot of like, I didn't go away to college. I sort of have some like unresolved like jealousy about that. I'm like, oh, if I could have gone away to one of those like East Coast liberal arts schools, I'd be so cool. This made me so glad I stayed home, because just some nonsense happening from a real creep. So that's what I feel like so many shows are about to start. I'm really excited. Yellow Jackets is coming back soon. Ted Lasso's coming back soon. Like, so many, like, I feel like we're in a real like Succession the next season. I'm also rewatching one of my favorite shows, Better Call Saul. I love all the stuff they do with flashbacks. I think it's it's a smart show to watch if you like that kind of storytelling, if you like the idea of like setting up a scenario and then like, how are you going to resolve it and get to it that like is still satisfying while still knowing what happens. So yeah.
So that was a question I left off the list, but that I liked. And so I like that you brought this up. So one question was, hold on, let me see if I want to read it correctly. So of course now my little document's not loading because it's at the bottom. Okay, we're getting there. Oh, so what is your favorite film and how has it impacted or influenced your writing, do you think? Or one of them?
My favorite film is Little Shop of Horrors. Wait, hang on, I'm going to take these off for a second. I even have my plant here at work. My work bestie got this for me for my birthday, and now it lives on my desk. I love that movie so much because like the stage play is a tragedy and a lesson about the evils of capitalism, but the movie is basically a romantic comedy, and the complication is a man-eating plant. which I think is incredible. So I really think it's like, to me, what I've learned is that like you can use, like you can look at any piece of art and sort of like use it for inspiration, use it to find the kind of storytelling that matters to you. I also love that movie because it's like about weirdos and everyone looks like a weirdo in it. Like they're not like beautiful, like in a Hollywood, like the leading man is Rick Moranis. Like that's all I want in a movie is just like a nerd and glass. Like that makes me feel like I can be a leading man. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm also awkward with glasses and would drop a box of plants. So like, great.
Awesome. Okay. And then our final question is, what are you currently reading?
Let me tell you, I just finished a book called Diary of a Misfit by Casey Parks, which is a memoir and a mystery. It really felt like listening to like a long, like a serial or an S-Town or like a really good episode of This American Life, like that kind of storytelling where it's like a little about you and it's a little about the story you're trying to uncover. It's a long book, but I thought it was beautiful. I just read a romantic comedy called Sorry Bro, which despite its name is a queer romantic comedy about Armenian American women, and I really loved it.
That sounds awesome, actually.
It's great. Highly
Okay.
recommend it.
Awesome. And so like you said, your new book For Her Consideration comes out Monday? Tuesday. You're having a book launch event.
My book launch event is at Skylight Books on Monday at 7. It's President's Day. We're all off work and school, so might as well go.
Not us, because
we're not all off work. I don't know why I said that. Some people
I
have
don't
to
know
go to work.
why. We were off last week and we were off this week. Nobody knows why. Everybody's like, it's for President's Day. And everybody's like, but President's Day is next week. And I'm like, I don't know. That's just what the calendar says. I'm going with it.
Someone was like, are we off for Lincoln Day? I was like, there's no Lincoln Day. It's President's Day. What are you talking about?
Okay.
There probably is a Lincoln Day, but like, we're not off for it.
Yes. So thank you so much again for being here with us. We really appreciate you being here. I have some closing remarks besides Skylight Books.
Thank you, everyone. I love talking to a class. Thank you, Professor Brown. You're always a wonderful host.
Oh, thank you. So once again, we would like to thank the Pasadena Festival of Women Authors for sponsoring this event and supporting it. If you would like to see more events like these, please consider donating $5 or more to our Creative Writing Growth Fund through the PCC Foundation. So I will provide a link to the foundation along with directions for giving and the Facebook comments on this video. And we thank you for any support you give. We also want to, again, thank our wonderful visiting writer, Amy Spalding. Please join us on March 1st at 2 p.m. when we welcome Kaylin Bayron, the next writer in our series. And we'll be talking about adaptations and writing for teenagers in that one. So thank you again. And let me, I got to stop recording. Perfect. And let me turn off YouTube. Oh, no, it is turned off. No, it's not.